Hey, good morning or good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you're from. Got Glenn Setchfield, VP of Marketing for DMI here, and also have Eric Warner and our very own Maureen Walker standing by. Just going to let you gather. I really appreciate you being here, and I know a lot of you were in the previous webinars as well. So as you can imagine, today it's going to be another engaging and educational Sandler webinar. In our first Sandler sales training webinar, we discussed maximizing your engagements with clients and prospective clients, specifically how to effectively set the stage to have a productive discussion and gain mutual agreements on building your relationship. Then in session 2, we focused on what motivates people to make changes and how to discover that motivation. And in our final session, we're going to focus on the art and the science of asking good questions. So just a reminder that if you join all 3 webinars, you'll be able to access Sandler online training programs specifically built for financial advisors who want to accelerate their business and maintain a healthy growth trajectory. Our facilitator, as he has been on all these sessions, is Eric Warner. Eric is the owner of Sandler Training in Boston. And like many of you, he's the owner of his business and responsible for its success. So, in the past 10 years, he's partnered with the sales team at DMI and worked with thousands of individuals who are consistently focused on their own personal and professional development and want to build strong relationships with their clients, one conversation at a time. As always, Maureen is going to help out with the Q&A and chat function. So please engage with us that way. We love the engagement. And of course, also, Eric brings some extra technology that he'll explain here in a little bit to the presentation. Engage that way too. It's a lot of fun. We'll likely save questions for the end of the webinar. And then at the end today, we'll also discuss how you can get access to the Sandler software offer that we've been discussing. So if you attended all 3 webinars, this software will be yours at no cost. If you were unable to attend and you're a DMI licensed agent, then there's a substantial discount for you on not only the new Advisor Launch Accelerator software, but also the essentials with certification and DISC assessments, or we can bundle all of the above, but we're going to get into those details later, explain all that to you since this is the last of the 3 webinars. And if you aren't a DMI licensed agent, now is a really great time to join. But Eric and I, again, we'll discuss that at the end. So with all that being said, I think I'm just going to hand it off to Eric. I think we've got all the process stuff out of the way here.
All right. Thank you, Glenn. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Maureen, for helping us out with questions and things that may pop up along the way. So as Glenn said, my name is Eric Warner. I am the owner of Sandler Training here in Boston, and we focus on really helping salespeople. And I know many of you guys don't consider yourselves to be salespeople. You are advisors, and your job is to advise clients on what's best for them. But the reality is, unless you gain them as a client, you really can't advise them. So a lot of what we do is on the selling side of the house, making salespeople sales professionals. So what we're going to focus on today is leveraging questions. As Glenn mentioned, we started the webinar series with how do we gain mutual agreement and getting people on board with what you need to do to have a productive dialogue with them and then to gain commitments with them to move forward. All right. Then we talked a little bit about, what drives motivation, what causes people to make changes, and how do we uncover that to figure out, is this someone that we can help or not? And today we're really going to talk about questions and how to ask better questions, right? And as we've done in the previous 2 webinars, we use an interactive slide platform, which helps us engage you, get some information from you along the way. We do some polling and some interactivity associated with this as we go. So there's a couple ways to join these the interactive slides. One is to click the link that I put in the chat. You can go on that way, or you can simply scan this QR code here and join via your phone. And sometimes that's the easiest way to do it. You got your phone right in your hand. I know most of us don't leave our phones too far away. And also, it helps me keep you focused on us rather than other stuff that's going on your phone. So there's a dual motive there. So if you can join our interactive slides, I'll leave that up for a little bit. That'll help us stay engaged with you along the way. You can use reactions in there. You can give me thumbs ups. You can laugh at my bad jokes. We're going to try to avoid the crying icon as much as we can. We want to keep everybody happy and enjoyable here. And then you'll be able to give us some feedback along the way. So I see several of you joining. Looks like we've got about 65 of you or so on the webinar, and I see about 23 of you doing those slides. So don't be shy, hop on there. It doesn't hurt at all, and it helps you keep some engagement as we go along the way. So I'll leave that up for a minute, and I'm going to start here. Now, this might be a controversial quote, but this is one of many Sandler rules that Sandler has surrounding sales success. And one of them is, your value as a financial professional is determined by the information you gather rather than the information that you give. Now, I'm sure many of you probably don't agree with that. Right? You are professionals. You understand markets. You understand situations. You understand risk. You understand reward. You've got proof of a lot of past success. And the more opportunities you get to tell people your story and what you do and how you've helped and the results that you've created, well, perhaps the higher the likelihood that you'll gain more clients. So my first question using those interactive slides, do you agree or disagree with that statement? That your value as a financial professional is determined by the information you gather versus the information that you dispense. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? Or are you not sure yet? Maybe I'll have to convince you. Okay. So several of you not sure. Several of you agree. No disagreements yet. Okay. Are you guys just telling me what I want to hear? Do you truly believe that your value is surrounding the information you gather and not that you give? Well, I suppose you wouldn't have signed up for a webinar about asking better questions if you thought that the secret to your success was going to simply be to tell a good story, right? So most of you agree with that statement, and I'm happy to hear that, right? But look, here's the thing. Sometimes asking questions is hard, right? Learning to ask questions is not something we're conditioned to do. The reality is most people are more comfortable talking than they are giving or asking questions. And we're also taught at a very young age when somebody tells us to do something or asks us for something, asks us a question in some nature, we're conditioned to do what they want. We're conditioned to make them happy. We're conditioned to answer their questions so we don't upset the apple cart. And frankly, sometimes that kind of behavior can get in our way, right? It can get in the way of, us having really productive conversations with a lot of the people that we're talking to. So just one more quick reminder. I see some folks have joined. If we are using an interactive slide platform here today, so if you want to scan the QR code there on the left of the slides, or if you've just arrived and you missed the chat, you can join these slides as well on a web browser. If you've got multiple monitors in front of you and you want to click that link, you can join the slides that way. And I see about half of you have joined the slides. So don't be shy. Go ahead and get on there. Let's keep those interactions coming. So the reality is sometimes we have to stop and learn to ask better questions, right? We're very good at learning our value propositions and learning about the products and services that we have and learning, to what situations they might make the most sense, and perhaps spending a lot of time learning how to articulate what will make sense for somebody else. But a lot of times we don't stop and think about, do I have all the right information? Do I understand their situation? Do I understand their timing? Do I understand their view of risk, their view of opportunity, to make sure that this is going to be something that will resonate with them, that will serve a need for them, that will, frankly, cure some pains that they may have, right? So learning to ask questions is not something we always spend a lot of time doing. So that's going to be the focus really of today. And let's talk about why first. Why is it important to ask questions? And one of the things that we got quite a bit of value out of as part of this little thing called the pandemic that happened a few years back was a huge amount of selling interactions went online. And through companies like Gong, who is a strategic partner of Sandler's, we were able to capture a considerable amount of data and information about what successful sales calls looked like. And this data really comes from the how many questions are being asked in a typical sales call. And the data is pretty compelling here. So what it's showing you, and this is a typical discovery call. So a 30-minute phone call on discovery, what's the sweet spot that continues the sales process? So thinking about, do we get a next step? Does that next step continue? And then ultimately, does that turn into an opportunity for us down the road? What is discovered here is there's a sweet spot for the right amount of questions. And if you're in that low criteria, less than about 6 questions, you're less than 50% chance of either winning an opportunity or getting the opportunity to move that forward. You get into the 1 to 10 range, it starts to tick up significantly. But then when you get into about the 11 to 14 range, we're at about the sweet spot where 74% of those opportunities convert into action. You get below that or above that number, starts to feel maybe a bit like an interrogation, and it drops off a little bit. But the net of this, the more questions you ask, the higher the level of commitment you gain from your prospective client. So clearly, being prepared to ask a significant amount of questions, if you do the math on a 30-minute call, that's a question roughly every minute and a half to 2 minutes, you're asking a question, right? So it's important how much you ask. It's also important when you ask. So Sales Hacker, another partner of Sandler's, did some analysis on talk-listen ratios. And what they discovered when throughout the sales process, on average, the sales professional is talking 43% of the time, and the buyer is talking 57% of the time, the win rates are considerably higher. So the ideal ratio is for you to be listening more than you're talking, right? And it's a roughly 50-50 split there, right? A little bit more balance to the prospect talking than you, right? But the more that you can be asking questions, the better. Now, it's also important to think about, when are you asking those questions? So there's a bit of subtlety in this chart, right? But this one talks a little bit about the difference between average reps and top performers. And what this is showing is throughout the duration of a call, the frequency of questions that are asked, okay? And where the frequency is indicated is anytime you see a spike is where a question is asked. So what you see on the average rep side is they're asking a lot of questions, but you might notice all those questions are at the very front of the conversation. And then there's a big drop off where perhaps the prospect is either responding to their questions, or worse, they're going into show up and throw up mode and pitching something. And then you start to see some questions bounce out at the end. But we want to try to avoid what we call stacking these questions at the beginning and spreading them out throughout the conversation. And if you look at your top reps, let me clean this up a little bit. If you look at the top performers, you see a much more conversational pattern. There's questions that are sprinkled in, and then there's some dips in the middle, which indicate there's interactive response that's going on. So it's important that we ask a lot of questions, but it's more important that we pace out these questions effectively throughout the call, and we give people the opportunity to talk and respond, right? So I take the net of that, right? Thinking about who's doing most of the talking, you or the prospective client. And then, are we spreading these out to have a comfortable conversation to drive this forward? This is also a compelling statistic that comes from Gong, which is the length of response given by a prospective client, the longer they talk in given response to any question, the higher the likelihood of success. So what you tend to see here is on the lower end of this scale, on the lower end of this scale, you've got about a 20% win rate when you're getting very short answers from your prospects, right? So this is length of story in seconds. So as we get out here, this is 200 to 250 seconds, right? Which is largely 2 to 3 minutes of response, right? It's more than that, 2.5 to 3 minutes of response in terms of how are they responding to your questions? And this is a very important stat to think about, is changing the types of questions that we ask. The reality is we live in a very confusing world. And as part of a confusing world, we often, when we ask questions, we tend to ask yes or no or close-ended questions because we want confirmation of what we perhaps already think or what we already know. So we have a tendency to frame our questions in a yes-no environment. The reality is the more time we spend thinking about how we're asking these questions, we can drive a better, frankly, longer response, right? If you're asking closed-ended yes or no type questions, you're going to get short responses, which really drive down the success of your opportunities. The more the customer is talking, that's a 60% win rate. So you're going from a 20% win rate to a 60% win rate. Considerable difference there in terms of the types of questions you're asking and the response perhaps that you're garnering, okay? So there's a lot of data here to support we should be asking more questions, right? We should be asking, questions spread out throughout the conversation. The prospect should be talking more than you are. And somewhere between that 11 to 14 questions per 30 minutes will get us what we want. But the reality is sometimes when we analyze call data from a lot of our clients, we find the average rep is talking 65% of the time and listening 35% of the time. So our plan to ask questions and our execution of asking questions isn't always where we want it to be. So my question for you guys, and this is back to the interactive slide platform, and if you either got disconnected or you haven't been able to join the interactive slide platform, you can do so by scanning that QR code that's on the screen or by clicking the link that's in the chat and going on that way. So tell me why you think we don't ask more questions. Is it a mindset that we need to show our expertise, or that we're conditioned to provide answers when people ask us, ask for things, or we don't want to look foolish, right? Sometimes people think that, we're paid to know all the answers. And if we ask too many questions, they won't think we will understand, right? Or, we think people need to be convinced, or maybe it's just uncomfortable to ask questions. It's easier to just tell the story, or maybe we're just not prepared. Okay. All right. So I see roughly, looks like 2/3 of you have given a response here. Okay. There's a lot of weighing towards we need to show our expertise, right? We're conditioned to give answers, right? Maybe some fear that people don't want to be interrogated, right? And maybe we're just not prepared to ask, right? Okay. So all of these situations can be controlled, right? We can make decisions about how we approach a conversation, right? There's no question you need to show that you're an expert and you clearly understand what you do, the markets, the situations, right? But the reality is everybody wants to know, do you understand it from their perspective, right? So you can tell a good story, but does that story fit what they want to hear, right? And that's where you really get into asking good, solid questions. Because look, there are some inherent challenges with communication. One is, well, in general, we're taught to answer all the questions that we're asked, right? It's not polite to not answer a question or give an evasive answer, right? But often, people they'll ask you safety questions that are really somewhat meaningless rather than ask you the real question, right? So we have to stop and think when we're having a conversation with somebody and they're asking us questions like, can you tell me more about this? Can you show me how this works? Can you give me a recommendation or a plan, right? What makes you better than our current plan or the current person that we're working with? Why should I consider working with you or your firm? How can you help me? Right? Those are all things that we might look at as, well, these are potential buying signals, or these are potential moves. If I can tell them why, then they're likely going to want to work with me versus what they're doing. But the reality is, we don't know why they're asking those questions. We don't know what they're looking for from an answer. We don't know what their perspective is on their current situation. So we have to stop and think before we respond. Let's reverse the situation a little bit. Now, reversing, for any of you who have had exposure to Sandler training in the past, it's a critical element of how we manage the interactions with clients and prospects, right? We talked about the upfront contract in our first session, which is setting the stage and getting permission to ask questions, getting permission to qualify, getting permission to understand certain situations before you give folks, what you may need to provide them about your expertise. We talked about discovering pain, compelling reasons for them to do something different, right? And anytime you bring a recommendation to a client, you're asking them to do something different. So you've got to reverse a little bit to understand, where do we stand, right? And we also have to remember that a lot of things that our prospects say, right, is sometimes masked, right? So the intent, if they make a demand of you in some way, shape, or form, send me some information on this, right? That demand is not always what they're intending, right? So we sometimes have to get past that and figure out, what does that actually mean, right? Sometimes they'll throw an objection at you. The fee structure on this seems too high for us, right? That's an objection, right? You can't really overcome that objection until you truly understand, where is that coming from, right? So the sooner you can get behind your client's issues, the better chances you have of overcoming them, right? And we've also got to be mindful that a lot of times prospects might smokescreen answers, right? They won't really ask you the real questions that they want to ask, or they'll give you answers that perhaps hide facts, actions, or intentions, right? Or maybe straight up give you misleading, right, answers, sometimes intentionally, so they can gather more from you, or they may make unsupported or exaggerated statements, right? And if you think about all of these things, if any of this is going on, you're going to have a very difficult time serving that client in an effective way. Is that fair? So let me start with a quick question here. Why do prospective clients of yours, or even existing clients of yours that you're talking about putting into a new program, why do they not tell you everything, right? Why do they not tell you maybe critical information, or not tell you all of the variables that might be happening in their world? Why is it that you think that they do that? Do they not want to lose leverage and feel that they might be taken advantage of, right? Is it because they've had issues in the past by opening up and perhaps trusting others, right? They don't know what they should be telling you, right? Or they think the less that they say, the more information you'll end up giving them. Okay. And again, if you got bounced off the slides or you want to join, if you came in late and you want to join, you can scan that QR code. That'll get you back on. Or you can click the link that's in the chat and you can get on there that way. And if you've seen this link now 5 times, I apologize for that. Thank you for staying focused with us. Okay, so look, a lot of that, there's some truth in here, right? They don't know what they should be telling you. So sometimes you have to help them, right? You want to have them feel like they're not going to lose leverage and they can fully trust you, and let them know that, it's okay. Maybe they're not the only one and they shouldn't be uncomfortable, right? So we can get past a lot of this if we really focus on how we're asking some of these questions, right? Because people who are really good at framing questions are frankly really smart. But sometimes people think, well, if I ask too many questions, they're not going to think I know what I'm doing. So I need to tell them more about what I'm doing and ask less. Well, the reality is we got to get past mind reading, right? Oop, very sorry for that. That is a major trainer faux pas. I thought my phone was on silent. Okay. But we've got to get past no mind reading, right? We've got to understand clearly, right, what they're saying versus what you might be hearing, right? So when you talk to somebody who says, well, we're already working with somebody else, right? You might be hearing a question in there that says, why should we consider to work with your firm? Or we're happy with our current plan. You might be thinking, well, let me tell you why I could build you a better one. Or, your fees are higher than what we're accustomed to. Maybe they're looking for some sort of a discount or a justification as to why. Or we can do this ourselves, right? Maybe it's what do you think that you could be doing that they're not doing? So a lot of times we hear things like that and we launch into, well, let me tell you. And that, frankly, can be dangerous because one, we might sound like any other salesperson who is trying to convince them of something that they may or may not want to do, which frankly causes you to lose trust pretty quickly. Or maybe they're telling you the truth, but they're not fully happy and we're not quite sure what would cause them to change their mind, right? So we have to stop and think for a second. And the way I like to think about this is there are a lot of things that prospects may say to you that trigger you to go into, let me say, pitch or convince mode, right? Sometimes they make demands. This sounds really interesting. Send me over a proposal or an outline of everything that we've talked about and give me some things to think about, right? Or they may ask you a question, right? The question may be, can you tell me why you're better than working with XYZ firm? Or they may make statements. Well, we're not ready to do this yet, right? Objections. Your fee structure is higher than what we're used to, right? Those are all things that tend to trigger you to take action that maybe causes you to inadvertently give up leverage. So back to our interactive slides here for a second. What are some of those questions, demands, statements, objections that you hear from prospective clients, right? People that you're actively trying to, work with or move to a new product or, bring into perhaps a new offering of yours. What are some of the things that they say to you that kind of trigger you to go into answer mode? They trigger you to go into, well, let me give you information. Let me tell you more. Let me try to show you, tell you, paint the picture for you, but how we might be better. So this is an open response question, a little bit more difficult than the other. Okay, we're happy with our current advisor. There's no current need. I'm assuming I'm dive is I'm fine, maybe. Can't afford, to make these changes. Okay. Keep them coming. Yeah, I need time to think about it. Always a favorite. Okay. What will you be doing for me? Okay. Need time to talk it over with somebody else, right? Right. Not needed at this time, right? I already have this, right? Lots of work to make this move, right? So there's a lot of things in there, right? I don't think it's worth it. Right? I don't know you, right? I'll call you back. Always a favorite, right? What will you be doing for me? I'm good already. I have an advisor. Yeah. So there's a lot of things in here. And if we think about it, and I'm going to group these answers real quick to see, if we group them up, if we can get some categories here. So, but there's a lot of things in here that we could probably give some pretty articulate responses to. But the reality is we're not really sure, right? One is, are they telling you the truth? Two, is this some sort of a smokescreen where they're not telling you everything? Or do they even know that they're in a good spot or not, right? So a lot of times we've got to go a couple layers deeper here to figure out, what's the best way to answer this, right? What's the best way to help them get past this? So when we think about a couple things, a couple rules pop into mind. One is never answer an unasked question. So when you get those statements, those demands, or even objections, we tend to convert those into questions that weren't asked, right? Or when we get questions, right? Can I call you next week, right? We tend to accept those questions sometimes at face value. So in order for us to get to truth, we have to think about how do we reverse effectively. Now, here's the struggle. It's not easy, first of all, to respond to some of those statements with a question because you don't really know where that's going to go. So also, sometimes we have to make suggestions as part of our questioning. And if we're not careful with that, we can alienate our potential client. So thinking a little bit about how do we put some rules and some structure behind how do we develop that situation a little bit more before we provide an answer, which may or may not take us in the right direction. So to do that, there's a lot of different ways to ask questions, right? But you might notice at the very heart of this, you've got a softening statement / permission, right? Where you're pausing a little bit and saying, okay, that's a valid concern, or I understand what you're asking here. Can I ask you just a couple clarifying things before I give you an answer on that, right? So you're either softening by validating what they've said, repeating it back to them in some way, shape, or form, or getting permission to get more clarification, right? And if someone is confrontational in that regard, you really have to stop and question, are they buying in or not, right? So it's not a lot to ask, frankly, about, can we go this further? But then there's multiple types and ways to ask questions that are largely what we would call reverses, right? Which are basically backing the conversation up a little bit to get more clarity about how we move forward, right? And I'm going to walk you through each of these in a couple of examples. But, one of them is just simple curiosity, right? A lot of times we have been in our roles for a significant period of time. We've heard these questions before. We've heard these statements in the past, and we think we know what they're asking, why they're asking, or the answer that we want to hear. And we've lost our curiosity. When we think back to when we were first learning our craft and what we were doing, we had to ask a lot of questions so we could go learn and figure out what we didn't know. But once we get to a certain point, we feel like we know it all, and curiosity tends to disappear, right? So it's important to be intentionally curious sometimes. And before you dive into an answer, you just stop and ask for a little help. I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. Help me understand. What do you mean by that? You mentioned X. What does X mean, right? That's just simple curiosity to get them to talk a little bit more, right? We might have to ask them a menu question. A menu question is simply acknowledging what they've asked, but giving them some potential options about why they're asking, right? And I'll show you some examples of what those are. Menu questions can be very effective when you want to help educate somebody or, frankly, provide a direction to what you should be talking about or what they should be thinking about, right? We also might use something that we call a third-party story, which is effectively talking about others in the third person. I've had that question asked of me a lot lately. It's not uncommon for people that are in your age demographic or within your situation to be asking me questions like that. It's a very common question. It's a very common concern. It's a very common statement that I've heard quite a bit. validate for them that they're not the only people who feels that way. And then perhaps layer that with a menu question to give them some options about why they may have that concern, right? Or we might use something called a negative reverse. And if you recall back from the first session, we talked about giving people an opportunity to say no. And giving people an opportunity to say no builds a considerable amount of trust. So a negative reverse is a question where the response you're hoping for is no rather than yes, right? Something might sound like, well, I'm guessing right now it's too soon to talk about, right, your financial plan for your kids in college. If they say yes, you have to acknowledge that and say, okay, it's too soon. We'll put that aside. If they say no, most of the time they'll say, no, we should talk about that because, right? So it doesn't really matter what the situation is. If you want to, frankly, soften in getting somebody to buy into something that you're doing, frame the question so your intended response is no versus yes, right? Most people that are trying to get others to take action are pushing people to ask yes-oriented questions. They're pushing for the yes. Yes, let's move forward. Yes, let's take a next step. Yes, let's get a quote together for this illustration or this scenario. Yes, let's move forward in moving some of our assets over versus, I'm guessing based on all our conversations, which have been good and productive, you're probably not ready to make that move to get assets transferred at this time, right? Same question, but if they say, no, we are ready, they'll be more committed and they'll also tell you why they decided that. So it's a very powerful, subtle technique of simply reframing how you ask the question. So there's a lot going on this particular slide, and I apologize for that. But this is the kind of thing that takes a lot of practice and thought to think about how do we weave different types of questions so we move away from those yes-no type questions and open up the conversation a little bit more, right? And one of the things that I like to think about, while we have curiosity curves and we have negative reverses and menu questions and third-party stories, one of the simplest ways to take a closed-ended question and make it opened is think about the question that you want to ask, right? Are you ready to keep talking, to move forward and take a next step, right? If you simply take that question and put a what or how in front of it, what are your thoughts on where we go from here? How do you feel about what we've talked about so far, right? You're taking that question about the next step and you're simply putting a what and a how in front of it, which causes them to talk versus them simply giving you a yes or no, right? So again, there's a lot of craft for this that will help you think about how do you create questions effectively, okay? So let me give you some examples. Let's pretend somebody says to you, well, just let me think this over, right? A simple reverse there is, well, what do you need to think over, right? You're just simply reversing and to try to get more information, right? Or a curiosity, think it over, help me understand. Or I'm confused, simply, and then stop, right? Most people will rescue you and help you understand what it is that they want to think it over, or frankly, why they want to think it over. Or maybe you could use a menu question. Well, typically when somebody says they want to think it over, it's for one of three reasons, right? Well, they're not convinced that this solution makes any sense. They have other options that they're also looking at. Are any of those reasons why you want more time to think? So you can give them a little bit of clarity. Sometimes you might need to make them comfortable, right? Recently, a lot of people have been asking us for time to think it over because they're comparing all their options. How about you, right? Again, it's a how question there that is helping you get an open response, okay? A couple other examples here, right? Open-ended question, if we can provide you some additional time, what should we do next, right? Or negative reverse, it sounds like you have some reservations about moving forward, right? I tend to like curiosity and negative reverse in this situation the most because, frankly, they're a little bit softer and you tend to get more dialogue out of them, right? But the reality is how you handle that situation and what's going to make you most comfortable is about understanding there's a lot of different ways to handle that and then knowing how you might frame it differently, right? Which takes preparation and thought, and it also takes a little bit of delivery practice so it doesn't sound assertive. So let me ask all you guys of those strategies that I showed you, menus, curiosity, third-party stories, those directional questions to keep the conversation moving, or that negative reverse, which ones do you like? Which ones of those do you like? Oh, good. The curiosity curve popped up there first. That's good. A lot of times people, they don't like the curiosity curve because sometimes they feel like, well, I should know. Like, why am I asking for clarification? I'm really smart. I shouldn't have to ask for clarification, and they don't, right? So I'm good to see that one pop up. So we're going to talk for a couple minutes about psychology of question asking as well. A lot of what we do here at Sandler is based on a concept called transactional analysis. We could go very deep into that for quite some time. But transactional analysis is largely around the psychology that exists when two people are transacting together, right? And they're in a conversation. And a lot of times, there's one element of that. There's three big elements called your parent, your child, and your adult, which drives a lot of those conversations. But the reality is, when you are the one that is to be in control of the conversation, you're largely doing it from a parental perspective. And if we think about this for a second, we have two types of parents. Perhaps some of us recall, if you are parents, you've all been there once or twice before, right? Where somebody does something that's, you don't want them to do, and you're very quick to tell them, don't do that, you shouldn't do that. That's not the right way to handle that. Or the nurturing parent, which may be the same situation. They've done something you don't want them to do, and you stop and ask them, well, help me understand, why did you decide to do that? Why did you think that was a good idea? Let's talk a little bit about what we could have done differently. Two different ways to handle the conversation. So when we think about how are we engaging with our potential prospects and we're handling certain situations, we got to balance the critical parent with the nurturing parent, right? And I apologize if you guys are getting a little bit of background noise. Apparently my building is getting power washed today, and the guy power washing it is directly outside. And I'm not really in a spot to go tell him to stop. So we're going to hope that my noise canceling stuff here is keeping that down. I apologize if you're getting any of that happening right now. I'm trying not to go critical parent and go out there and shout at the guy. And instead, I'm going to try to stay nurturing and keep the conversation going here. So a nurturing parent might respond to this same situation as we're evaluating all our options. That's completely understandable, right? It sounds like you've got some reservations about our solution and moving forward, right? It's inviting more of a conversation. It's validating what they're saying, and it's not, frankly, telling them what they should be doing, right? So thinking about, those balances, and we've all seen this. We've either been on the receiving end of the nurturing or the critical parent, or frankly, we've been the nurturing or the critical parent as we're dealing with our own offspring. Thinking about which messages are going to get through the best. Am I being critical in telling people, advising them what they should do, or am I being nurturing to try to figure out what's best for them? So a lot of times also, reversing happens in groups of three. And I like to put a framework behind this, right? And anytime somebody brings up an objection, a question, they make a demand of you to do something, or they simply ask you a question that you're not quite sure where that's coming from, how you handle that response goes an awfully long way to managing this effectively. So I like to start with an exploratory question. And sometimes that's the curiosity curve or simply mirroring what they said, right? Add into that, the next question is a third-party story to protect them, but give them some options to what you should talk about, and then confirm that you're taking this in the right direction. So I'll give you an example. Somebody might say to you, can you build us a quote or provide some options? Mirror curiosity. Options? Yeah, we're looking for options because we want to best understand what the right direction is to go, and we're really not sure yet. Okay, now you've got some clarity on what they mean by options. Okay, lots of people ask for options because, right? If they've given you some sort of wishy-washy answer here, you can give them a direction, right? What is it that you're looking for in these options? And then ultimately, a confirming question, right? I'm guessing it wouldn't make sense for us to discover a few of these scenarios before we get to that stage of giving you a quote, right? You're getting to more of a place where you can go deeper into the conversation, right? So it's a lot of times we have to think about when we're getting these objections, these questions, these demands from people, how do we gently move the conversation in a slightly new direction? So thinking a little bit about exploring, getting a direction, confirming things, and ensuring that they're bought in to go where you want them to go, right? So let me close with this. We had set aside about an hour to do this, and we've got about 45 minutes in, and I want to give you a little bit of time to ask questions and also show you a little bit about some of the content that you'll have access to if you've attended these. So let me start with this. So some tips for being better at asking questions. One, they're rapport building tactics. It's always good to understand things like someone's experience or someone's perception. So simply ask them when you're asking question, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, we're considering doing X. Okay. How did you come to that experience? Or what's your perception of that so far, right? Use it to build some rapport and understand their side of things. Always try to open that conversation with curiosity. If they say something that you're inclined to tell them they're going in the wrong direction, or that's not a good idea, or frankly, you don't want to do what they're asking you to do, right? Be curious about it. Interesting. Help me understand, right? Slow down, right? We looked at that chart, right? If you're not prepared to ask somewhere between 7 to 11 questions and be ready to how you're going to redirect the conversation, perhaps reverse it, then we're not really well prepared to have that conversation. Gain permission to ask. Goes back to the upfront contract. Set the stage effectively so you have permission to engage. And this one is critical. Ask one question at a time. Stop. Don't explain why you asked. And don't ask questions on top of each other. Ask one question. Give them time to respond. And then use mirrors and labels, right? Mirroring is simply repeating words back that they've said to you and perhaps attach some emotion to that, right? We have a difficult time planning for our child's college education. Difficult. That sounds frustrating. And stop and let them respond. They'll tell you why it's frustrating. They'll also tell you what they've been doing, right? Protect them with third-party stories. Let them know that other people are in the same boat, right? What you've heard from others, struggles that are common for them. Let them know that they're not alone, right? They'll feel better. Number 8, really important, right? Go for no. If you're going to ask them to make commitments to doing something, framing those with the option of them saying no versus yes will get you stronger commitments. And ultimately, it'll get you more of the yeses that you're looking for. Practice tonality, right? This is critically important. Tonality is recalled in terms of how people feel about a conversation, a question, or how something is being directed at them. Tonality is about the biggest driver of how they perceive what's happening here. So sometimes if you're going to reframe your questions and think about how you're using questions differently, take some time and role play and practice these questions if they're not what you're typically doing. Because if the tonality is wrong, it can blow up your conversation really quickly. And then give and take. Prepare your questions and your impactful answers as you go. So we've covered a lot of ground here with regard to questions today. And I know that that's a lot to digest, right? There's a lot of things in here with regard to how are we getting prepared to have our conversation and do our discovery effectively, and using that discovery to be suggestive about options, right? using things like third-party stories and menu questions to move that conversation forward. So a lot of what we've done here is we've covered a variety of different topics to help you, frankly, have better conversations, set the stage properly, find their compelling reasons to take action, and really get fully invested in what they want and how you can help. Okay. So we're at the point of the conversation here where, if you would like to learn more about what we are doing with DMI to help support advisors like you be more effective. At the end of the day, we want you to have more clients and have those clients be taking advantages of all the resources that DMI can provide you and to help you continue to grow your business. That's ultimately our goal. So as part of this, with our partnership with DMI, we are giving you access to some content. And I will give you just a quick preview of what that is. So this is our Sandler Learning Management Platform. And as part of this program, we will give you, if you've attended all 3 webinars, we will give you access to our new advisor launch platform. Now, I'll be very candid. I don't like the name of this program because it implies that the only people who could gain value from it are new advisors. I don't think that is the case. And I'll show you why. The content that's in here is, I'm going to go back this way. The content that's in here is really focused on some very important things on a regular basis that you still have to do, even if you've been in the business for quite some time. Prospecting, running good discovery interviews, and then getting to the feelings and the fact findings that will move people to make changes or do things differently, right? So whether you're working with existing clients, right, or you're trying to grow your business along the way, there is a lot of stuff in here that will help you. So these are all online, self-paced courses, right? And the way that they work is they're modules that as you click through them, it will take you into the materials that you can use. So there's a program guide, there's a prospecting workbook to help you work through and build, and then there's a toolkit that will help you with the implementation process. So as you progress through each of these lessons, they are video-based. Okay, so you'll have a video to walk you through all of the different content, as well as a description of each piece of this. And it'll take you through all of these surrounding the right mindset, how do you set your GPS to get to your destination, some talk tracks around how to have conversations effectively. And then at the end, there's a bit of a quiz to see how much you've learned and how much you've retained. So it's a very interactive program that you can build off of. So this is one of the offerings that if you've attended all 3 of the webinars, you can get access to this for free. You just need to go and speak with your contact at DMI. So if you are a DMI client, you want to reach out to your VP and they can help you. If you are not a DMI client, reach out to Declan Donahue. You can get there by scanning that QR code. And if there's anything that you'd like to speak to me about that is part of this webinar, I'll be more than happy to have a chat with you. This will link you to my calendar where we can jump on and have a quick 15-minute chat. So DMI is doing a lot of things with us to help you be more successful. Some of it is the online platform. Some of it is access to training and coaching resources. And some of it is ongoing that you can use with your teams or for yourself from a coaching perspective. So if you have an interest in hearing about any more of that, please feel free to jump on my calendar or jump on Declan's calendar to go from there. But I appreciate all of your time, your attention, and your participation through our slide platform and otherwise as part of this webinar. And thank you for tuning in. Glenn, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Eric. Love the presentation. Loved all this. I've actually gone through the software myself as well. I was really impressed with the user experience and all the content there. Fantastic. So just to clarify, if you're already an agent with DMI, just contact your sales rep for more details around everything we're discussing and offering here. For DMI Sandler discounts, not just that NALA software, but all of the software packages that are available. He just walked you through a piece of that portal. It's massive. But But for those Sandler discounts, best-in-class marketing, sales, service, product, and support, contact Declan again and get licensed with DMI. And if you have any questions about your qualifications around that software offer, also contact Declan. So, but yeah, like Eric Warner said, like Eric said, if you just want to ask Eric some questions directly, he's a great partner of ours. Reach out to him directly. But Declan is your man on the DMI side. And I think we've covered a lot today, Eric, and we've really enjoyed having you during the series, and look forward to doing more stuff like this. So I can't wait for whatever we do next. So we'll talk more about that.
Very good. Appreciate it.
Right.
Any questions, Maureen, that popped up?
If we could think back to that slide where you had the phone conversation, I'm not sure if it was a phone, the conversations of successful agents versus average agents and how they peppered in the questions.
This one here?
Yes, that one with top performers. Were these measurements from phone call meetings or in person? Do we know?
Yeah, good question. It's actually a combination of phone calls as well as Zoom face-to-face meetings. So if you think about what happened during the pandemic, virtually all of our interactions went online in some way, shape, or form. So this is a combination of both phone interactions as well as Zoom-based conversations.
Excellent. Thank you. And we do have one more so far. It's, could you talk a little bit more about the go for no?
Sure. I mean, I would like to ask a reverse here and say, what are you hoping I would like me to share here? Or what is it about the go for no that's maybe giving you some discomfort or curiosity? If I'm practicing what I preach here, I wouldn't just jump right in to answer that question. But on a webinar, this is hard to do. So go for no is really, it's a psychological concept. It talks a little bit, really about, if you think about reverse psychology of, you asking the opposite of what you're looking for sometimes tends to get you what you want, right? So when you ask for yes, and you're asking people to say yes to you, you're asking them to make a commitment. If you frame the question that the optioned response is you want them to say no, you're giving them the choice to do what you're asking. Right. So ultimately, when you push people towards a yes, they sometimes tend to back away. If you go for no, you're backing away. And if those folks are truly interested, they'll come closer to you. So it's a very slight edge approach, but it tends to get you more committed yeses than pushing people to sometimes say yes and tell you what you want to hear and then not be all that committed. So hopefully that helps. That's a very short answer to what is a longer psychological concept, but hopefully that helps.
Excellent. Thank you. And could we put that last ending slide up on the screen while we finish up here? And I guess this go for no, maybe we want to have a whole webinar on go for no, Glenn and Eric.
Right.
People are looking for examples of go for no. So at this point, I think it's safe to say, if you would like more information about go for no, please reach out to Eric. He's a wonderful instructor, tons of information, and probably more than we can cover in the next minute.
Right. It probably doesn't make sense for anybody to jump on my calendar for 15 minutes to talk about going for no.
Right.
That probably doesn't make sense. I'm hoping you all say no to that, and maybe you jump on my calendar and we have a quick conversation. So that's an example, Frank. I hope that helps.
Perfect.
And in our follow-up, we will also include Eric's Calendly information as well. It's should also be there in that QR code. But and then I would also say that if you haven't attended all 3 webinars, again, give Declan a call and he can work with you on discounts. Okay.
Yep.
But guys,
and I apologize for the my building looks meticulously beautiful right now. My windows are perfectly clear, but I apologize for the power washing happening in the background. Really great timing on that.
We barely noticed. But thanks again, Eric. Always a pleasure. Maureen, thank you. Everybody that attended, thank you so much. We appreciate you. And everybody have a great day. All right.
Yes, David, I'm answering your question in here. Yes, that is the takeaway.
There you go.
All right. Cheers all. Thank you.
Thanks, team. Everybody have a good one.